ولا يجوز أن نفسد في علاقاتنا التاريخية.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Lynn Tamim and these are today's top stories. Storm Alexa hits the country for a third consecutive day and reportedly kills one Syrian refugee infant in Akkad. Society activist Sarah Assaf is in our studios talking about March 14, Hezbollah's arms and the conflict in Syria. A new UN report confirms the use of chemical weapons in an attack near Damascus and probably in 4 others. 7 families were evacuated from an apartment building in Tripoli after large cracks appeared in the structure's facade. The 9-story Marj al-Zuhur building near Khadija Mosque in Abu Samra was deemed unsafe after municipal engineering experts examined it and recommended it be demolished. They said the 80-centimeter crack in the facade was due to the additional construction of 2 floors to the originally 7-story building. Lebanese authorities announced they have seized $1 million in forged currency and apprehended the culprits behind the counterfeiting. Security officials say 3 Lebanese, identified only by their initials, were arrested during a raid. Authorities also confiscated a stolen Nissan Sunny car with forged documents, a pistol along with its ammunition, and a fake firearms license. The 3 men will be referred to the relevant judicial authority. A Beirut judge has issued a 1-year prison sentence against a businessman for trading in expired meat. The national news agency says Judge Bassam Taqiyuddin also imposed a 50 million Lebanese pounds fine on Ahmed Mohammed Yassin. Authorities found expired meat and chicken in his depot in Nashrafiyeh in 2011. A Syrian child has died from cold weather in the northern Akkad as the blustery storm kept a tight grip on Lebanon. This is according to the national news agency, which says a 3-month-old Mahmoud Ra'a died in a room where his family were staying in the town of Akrum. But this claim hasn't been confirmed yet. Social Affairs Minister Wael Abu Fahour says international aid to help Lebanon's Syrian refugee population is falling short of expectations during the storm. The Meteorology Department says Lebanon is expected to witness heavier rainfall today before much-awaited sunshine on Saturday. And now we turn to Yumna Naufal for an exclusive interview. Over to you, Yumna.
Thank you, Linda. Here to further discuss the situation in Lebanon is civil society activist Sarah Assaf with me. Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm going to get right to it. The Hezbollah-led March 8 alliance stepping up its rhetoric in the run-up to next year's presidential election, which is supposed to happen in May, by reiterating its conditions for the formation of a new cabinet. Now, we have been without a cabinet for almost 10 months. And the cabinet deadlock has raised fears of a presidential vacuum if Parliament fails to elect a new leader on time. And I want to know, because I know you've worked with March 14 and supported them in the past, where do you think March 14 is in all of this?
I think March 14 is not present enough. I mean, as usual, and until now, March 14 has always failed in having a very unified decision about any upcoming big event that's happening in the country. So unlike March 8, which is always very systematic, every time they all agree on one decision and they all fight for it and lobby for it. March 14, on the contrary, it's always everything till the last minute. You feel there's no real plan, there's no real vision. So I'm afraid that March 14 will not be ready for this major event that's happening, like it was not ready for many other events before.
So it's just been a little bit absence. Speaking of March 14, its leader, its current leader, former Prime Minister Saad Hariri, met with former Prime Minister Fouad Senoura in Paris a couple of days ago, and they spoke about the Special Tribunal for Lebanon and its importance. And as they said, the Special Tribunal for Lebanon is scheduled January 16, 2014 as the date for the start of trials of the 4 Hezbollah members indicted in the 2005 assassination of former Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. And so far, we haven't seen Hezbollah even acknowledge that the special tribunal is legitimate. And I know you have your concerns about that because you think that Hezbollah should surrender these 4 people and move forward to more justice. Am I correct?
Exactly. I think that Hezbollah, I mean, it's not only that they do not believe in the special tribunal and they make it a point to always discredit it. Now, because the special tribunal is going to be very active as of January, we're starting to hear a lot of propaganda around the, the killing of Rafi al-Hariri. They're starting to mention, again, we're starting to see stories about Wissam al-Hassan.
Right, how Wissam al-Hassan could have been involved in the assassination.
And all of this because the special tribunal is coming very soon. And I think that Hezbollah, I mean, it's high time that Hezbollah realizes that Hezbollah's part is Lebanese before being anything else. And it's most of the Lebanese, a whole community follows Hezbollah. It's high time for Hezbollah to realize that they cannot continue like this, because like this we can never really build a country.
So what is the first thing you think Hezbollah should do?
I think the first thing Hezbollah should do is, even if they do not believe in the special tribunal like they say, they should just surrender the 5 people who are indicted in the murder of Rafi Hariri and let, I mean, the rule of law be enforced. Let them go. Let them try to fight for their case if they really believe that they are not the murderers of Rafi al-Hariri.
I want to bring this to the role of the army, which a lot of people question, and a lot of people say, if there was an army in place and the army was strong enough and legitimate, then Hezbollah would not be what it is today, which a lot of people believe it should not have the arms and the weapons that they have. Am I correct?
Yes, I think the role of I think the whole issue of the army has become a taboo in Lebanon, and I think this is wrong, because somewhere we all know that Hezbollah has a much stronger military presence on the ground than the army. This is on one side, and this is, I mean, it's normal that the army cannot really act like a normal army because of the presence, because of the military presence of Hezbollah. And many things happened in Lebanon before, many events where we saw that the army was not really objective. And this is happening.
Is Tripoli
still.
One of them, you think?
Tripoli is one of them, Abra is one of them, May 7, 2008 is one of them. All these events contributed, if you want, they're accumulating and they're contributing in making a gap between the army and a certain community in Lebanon, which is the Sunni community. And I think if March 14 does not really take this issue seriously and try to discuss it in a more open way, this gap's going to widen. I mean, we see that many times in Tripoli, the army is being targeted. And of course, it's not the fault of the soldiers on the ground.
Right. I mean, Tripoli has, and as a civil society activist, you can tell me more about this. Tripoli has a lot of issues, most of it coming right now from the spillover of the Syrian crisis, as we see between Jabal al-Muhsin and Bibi Tabene, and the Alawites, pro-Assad people, and the Sunni anti-Assad people. And it's hard to, every now and then, there's been the bombings in the summertime, every now and then there are clashes, people constantly die. What's the solution with this?
I think, first of all, we should separate between the clashes, the clashes which have become, unfortunately, like a mainstream event in Tripoli, and between the 2 explosions, which are literally a terrorist act that happened on Tripoli. Yes, the clashes definitely are a spillover of what's happening in Syria. The terrorist acts, which is the bombing of the 2 mosques, need to be really tackled in a different way, because those bombings, there were investigations that happened after those bombings, and those investigations showed that Ali Eid, who's the head of the Arab Democratic Party, was responsible somewhere in those bombings. And until now, Mr. Eid has refused to go to the questioning of the military tribunal. And as long as the army, does not enforce the rule of law in Tripoli and get Ali Eid and Rifat Eid, the clashes are bound to become even worse, because now it's not only about the clashes that are happening between Bibi Tabene and Jabal al-Muhsin. Now, whenever someone from Jabal al-Muhsin goes to Tripoli, to Bibi Tabene, they're being targeted. Literally, they're being targeted. People are shooting on them. This is a huge problem, and this is bound to become even more dangerous.
I want to mention this. I know because it is also a big effect of what's happening in Syria. And I know we are affected by what's happening in Syria, by Hezbollah's direct involvement in Syria, and us being, a lot of different sects also providing humanitarian aid to Syrian rebels. What I want to know is, do you think that the situation in Lebanon is only going to be resolved when the Syrian crisis is resolved?
I think a lot of people are talking about the concept of neutralizing Lebanon, but I think it's very difficult to do that. And even if this is going to happen, it's not going to happen now, you know, in the middle of this huge crisis that's taking place. Maybe it will happen after, you know, when things get settled down a little bit and like we can discuss more, everyone can sit down and discuss more the concept of Lebanon and how do we want Lebanon to be, and if we want a neutral Lebanon, and if this is possible or not. But today, yes, of course, the issue of Lebanon is directly related to what's happening in Syria.
So we will not see anything happening. So we are currently basically being threatened by having no government, perhaps no president, and the Syrian crisis has no end in sight, and all these refugees are in. And
I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound a bit surprising, but I really believe that this is a detail. I mean, if there is a government or not today is a detail, because there was a government like a year ago, and it was not able to do anything, you know? And there was a government even before, the government of Prime Minister Saad Hariri, and it was also not able to do anything. So really having a government or not having a government, for me, is really like a detail when you look at the big picture. I think there's a huge problem in Lebanon. The country is hijacked. More lobbying should be done, like on a local level, on a regional level, and on a global level, to really put pressure on Hezbollah. And maybe now, you know, this closeness between the US and Iran could maybe, you know, take things to a better place in Lebanon. But the idea is that we really need to lobby, because we have a country that is hijacked, and this is what we need to work on. A government will not really make a difference.
all right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today,
Thank you,
Ms.
Yumna.
Sara Assaf. That was civil society activist Ms. Sara Assaf with us. We look forward to having you back here. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you, Yumna. And now, still to come in our program, North Korea executes the uncle of its leader, Kim Jong-un. That and more after the break. Welcome back. And now we move on with news in Syria. A new UN report states that in addition to the widely publicized chemical weapons attack on August 21st near Damascus, such weapons were probably used in 4 other locations in Syria between March and late August. The report examined 7 attacks in which chemical weapons use had been alleged. The areas include Ghouta, Khan al-Assal, Jubar, Sarakib, and Ash-Shafiyya Sahnaya. And now for news around the world in brief. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas rejects U.S. proposals for Israel to keep troops in a future Palestinian state along its strategic border with Jordan. The Palestinian source says Abbas also gave U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry a letter on Palestinian red lines, singling out the refusal to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. Tunisia's ruling Islamist party and opposition parties have reached a deal to name a new prime minister who will lead a caretaker administration until elections aimed at ending months of crisis. The deal on a new premier clears the way for the current government to step down later this month and end turmoil that has threatened to upset Tunisia's transition to full democracy. A delegation from the European Parliament has arrived in Iran for talks with Iranian officials. The delegation has been tasked with rebuilding links with politicians and broaching human rights issues. North Korea has executed the uncle of its leader, Kim Jong-un, days after he was dismissed. The state news agency KCNA announced his execution shortly after a special military trial. Jang Shan-taek was accused of a string of criminal acts, including corruption, womanizing, and drug-taking. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Storm Alexa hits the country for a 3rd consecutive day and reportedly kills 1 Syrian refugee infant in Akkad. Society activist Sara Assaf is in our studios talking about March 14, Hezbollah's arms, and the conflict in Syria. Finally, a new UN report confirms the use of chemical weapons in an attack near Damascus and probably in 4 others. Those are today's headlines from the English news team here at Future Television. We'll be back again tomorrow with more updates. Don't miss it.
ولا يجوز أن نقصد في علاقاتنا